So this is our status right now, right? If I'm in school or if I'm in any of these places, what am I really learning? If I go for a job, we'll say, I know how to take tests. That's all we're saying. But do you really know what are these things that you're really going to apply as an engineer? Do you know how to solve these problems? And what is it that you're really looking at? And are they fully educated? Whether it's an engineer and an entrepreneur, are you really fully educated to even understand that green today is about efficiency, is about cost benefits, which has gone beyond feel good as well as tax ops? I think this is something that we need to make sure that most of the students understand. And I think it's time for the education system also to move beyond compliance and focus more on desirability. That means this is something that every person should aspire for and say, this is my contribution for why the goddamn stuff I'm in this world. I have at least saved so much of energy, so much of water. This is my contribution that I've given back, which I would have otherwise used, or I would have otherwise, kind of given it away to somebody else, but I'm preserving it, or this is my contribution to the world going forward. This is something that we need to start building and making young minds think about it. So how do we think we can do this? And if you look at most of the millennials today, they don't study the same way we used to study. You can't put them in a classroom and say, hey, this is what you need to do, and this is how you're going to achieve outcomes for all of them. And we used to just listen to them and identify what it was and go and write papers and answer these papers. But millennials don't understand that at all. For them, you call them millennials or you call them Gen Z, it still doesn't matter. But for them, it is still, for those young minds, it is still to say, why the hell should I do it? And how am I going to do it? Okay, you tell me that I have to do it, but how are you going to do it? And that is where most of the teachers and faculties fail to tell, how can I do it? Because they themselves are not involved in any such activities. They are not part of a movement to either save water or save energy or save plant or save flora or whatever that they want to really look at. Very few faculties themselves are indulged or indulging themselves into these areas which are very, very critical for a green environment that we want to be in. So what is it that these people expect? The problem is academia is still teaching young minds about what is the problem all about and why has this problem come. So you will either learn a history or you will understand what was happening and how these were and what led to this situation right now, whether it's climate change, whether it's temperature changes, it's problem with the environment, it's pollution, or all these areas. But at no point in time is even in class discussed or even an examination provided to answer and judiciously discuss how is it that we are going to solve this. And this is where more young minds are interested to say, you tell me how to do it. I'm ready to do it. I agree to what you're saying. But this is not part of their learning process. And this is what we are looking at changing. We want to make sure that students who come up, which are young minds of 16, 17-year-old in the diploma education space who are there, who understand not just what and why, but are engaged in trying to find out how can we solve this and what can we do to make sure that these problems can be solved. As diploma engineers, as young engineers of 18 and 19 years old, this is what we want them to get used to, imbibed, as well as apply them in their day-to-day lives as well. And there will be scores for them to achieve in each of these areas as well. So we will be building use cases in specific areas and seeing how those use cases are translated in learning, and also provide them different methods that they can use and try and test some of the concepts and see whether they work. And also this universal concept that what works in the Western world or the other worlds can work in India is another myth that we need to break. Some may work, but all may not. Everything needs to be adapted to what is there local. So we want to enable this as part of their learning and make sure that these students understand what that is and study this in depth, not just as a subject to write a piece of paper, but actually study this and understand how to find solutions and how you can make sure that you can address some of the problems locally as well as globally. The second, the notion that we come to classroom, they'll say, tell me something that's not already on Google. Don't come back to me and say, this is what it says. If Google says so, then we already know about it. There's nothing that you're going to teach me in class. but can you tell me what is it that's actually happening? Have you experienced it? So students today are expecting faculty to come to classrooms and say, I have experienced it, I have seen this, I know how this happens, and I am understanding what this is. And if a faculty doesn't bring that kind of knowledge into the classroom, they feel this guy has just read some book and coming here and giving me a narration of the book. And which is sadly the real truth of what is happening today in most of our systems that we're working on. And everybody either blame the system or the curriculum. But again, pedagogies are something which are unique to faculty and teachers can use that the way they want. And each subject can be taught, which is more interesting to students of how they can really look at. And this is where young minds are saying, can you please change this? Can you help us understand how we can really make an impact and how can we really change what's actually been wronged already, or so that we don't do any future wrongs as well. So here's some thought processes that I've put together of what we are trying to work on and have been advocating for a lot of people to really look at. One of the area is to really help them to understand what is local research. So as part of their learning process, let us say I'm doing built environment. So go to your apartment, go in and around your apartment, take 2 or 3 people of yourself, go and look around, find out what's happening in that space. Do you see something that's stark? Do you think there's excessive use of concrete? Do you think you've lost a lot of green? Do you think you can make this more efficient? How can you improve this? Enable peer-to-peer groups, collaborations. Earlier, it used to be called clubs. It's already been an abused statement. But can we give them scientific research methods that they can really go and use, find out, and then recommend to their own RWS and say, hey, look, this is the research we had. We spoke to our faculty. We spoke to people who are in the green environment. And this is the recommendation they're making. Why don't you guys start implementing this? So they, as kids of the community, will have a better say in the matter and can also make sure they influence their parents as well as the community at large to bring in that kind of changes. But what this really does is gives them real life learning of what's actually happening and how they could start finding solutions and not just be bogged down by saying, this is there, we know, but we don't know how to solve it. And we're not going to invest our time. But if a college or an institution says, you do this, if I can say that for what the work the child is going to go and do at home, in the community, I'm going to give you credit for it. Come here, I will give you credit. I will help you find methods. I will help you find solutions. Go back and talk to your RWA. Can we implement this? And it will be based on a very strong research work that the student will. Now the student has got research methods, understood how to conduct the research, understood what is green part of it, and also now understands that as an engineer, I have been able to engineer a solution for what I see as a problem, which is right in front of me. I don't have to go to a place and become an activist and do that, but I can do these solutions right here with my own fellow classmates or with my own peer groups, either my schoolmates or classmates who are all in the same community that we work together. So I'm also learning how to do research. I'm also learning how to work with people. I'm also now learning about the importance of how I can really engineer green as far as my own community is concerned. The second important aspect for us is that many a times we shy away from using the kind of technologies that students have got. How many of us can go to a student and say, can you really give me an augmented reality based experience of what will happen if I don't make this change, or consequences of certain changes that haven't happened? So you have ready-made models available on various apps, on softwares, where you can use those tools to really give them an experience to say, oh, in the next 3 years, this is where we'll be, in the next 5 years. So I will actually see in my own eyes how things are going to change in front of me. That is one aspect of it. But the second aspect is I can also start learning larger concepts as we go forward. If more of these kind of information and more of these cases of individual students themselves who are peers start putting up on a kind of a common platform, like a learning system or any of these things, and everybody will learn from these things. And they can be an open platform where a lot of students can come and learn from their own peers. So what we will plan to do is many of these use cases that we want to do, we'll host it on the Karnataka LMS. which is accessible by all our diploma students across the state. So a small issue that is happening in Gadag, a child in Bangalore can understand. An issue of urban, a student in Belgaum can understand, which is like remote. A rural student can also understand where exactly it's happening. An urban student can understand various rural. So it creates a kind of a collaboration, and it enables students to learn on their own pace parallelly, and really learn by others' experience and their own experience as well. But the key is to make sure that we make these tools which are relevant today and not tools which are outdated earlier. You know, a lot of students, to be honest with you, in English language are still taught how to write a leave letter to your principal. You know, nobody writes that today. Everybody writes. So the first question is, student, sir, we only send an email. Why are you teaching me how to write a leave letter? So many of these places where technology tools are available, students are more comfortable to share. Today, every student has a WhatsApp group and they would like to share in those words. So if we can create small snippets and send it to them, this becomes an ecosystem where we can start really sharing some of these best practices of what one person has done there and others. Of course, moderated, but helps the students really to come and share between themselves of what great practice are. And if we can provide certain amount of credit and say, this is what we take from you from your internship, or in any of these areas that you have done, if you can bring in a use case for us, then we'll be in a better position to appreciate what you're doing. And over time, we'll be able to create that kind of repository that every student will be able to appreciate. Students always like to hear from their own peers of what work they have done, rather than hear from some elders who come and tell them. They think when elders tell them, it's imposing. But when students peer-to-peer talk, they say, oh, this guy is doing it, wonderful, let me also try. So they'll be more motivated to kind of do that and learn as they go forward as well. And of course, they love technology. Every student you see today, the 18-year-old, 19-year-old are all on mobile phones. And that's the best way to reach them today. If you really want to talk to them, classrooms are not, but mobile phones are the best tools to really use them. So that's a relevance that we need to make sure that when we want to make young minds aware of green technologies, aware of green actually is today cost efficient, not just environment efficient, that is going to be very, very critical. And every time we need to make sure that we are giving them the answer for how. Okay, you said this has to change. Okay, how are you going to change it? Give me some thoughts. Okay, I'm not asking you to give me an answer right away, but at least give me some direction. Where do I go? Right? And how is it that I'm going to get benefited at the end of the day? And that is what most of these young minds are asking us. When they come to the class, they'll say, sir, all this is nice, but you please tell me how is it useful to me? If it is not, why the hell are you teaching me? And he'll not come back to the class. And most of the faculty today are so used to this book knowledge and chapter by chapter teaching that they've forgotten that the concept is bigger than the chapter. The concept evolved and then the chapter came, right? But sadly, teaching and examinations are more chapter driven than concept driven, and giving them the rationale. And to be honest with you, many of the faculty I've seen, very few of them really understand the rationale of why even that was done. You know, that is our biggest challenge that we want to do. So that is where we are really demotivating a lot of young engineers to say, even many of faculty have heard, adella bidi sir, green adella nodana sir nale, nodkolana sir. ಅವ್ರು ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಸರ್, 2 solar plant ಹಾಕ್ತಾರೆ, ಮುಗಿಸ್ತಾರೆ ಸರ್. But if I tell him that, look, it will bring down your electricity bill by so much, ಅದು ನಮ್ಮ problem ಅಲ್ಲ sir. So it's a very casual approach that you're actually doing. And many a times, can we create kind of predefined project statements or use statements that we can provide? So what we are trying to ask students who are civil engineering students and others is, okay, here's a predefined problem statement, right? Now, work with your fellow peers and come up with a solution of what it is. It may not have one solution, it can have multiple solutions, but can you work together as a project? So what we are saying is, don't come to me and say, this is a project, right? And sir, here's the project report. So today's submission, what student does is, they go there, pick up some project report, make some changes, print it, photocopy it, and submit it. And people just ask them, why was that? Anyway, ratified the project report. They come in and then they produce whatever they've said. And they say, project is completed. But the student has actually not gone through the learning process. So what we plan to do for these young minds is to say, we'll give you predefined problem statements and you will have to work only on those. It is not something that you think about it. In that, we want to tell them why is it important that sustainability has a role to play in this. And in that, we'll say, look, this is value engineering today. Value engineering is not about cutting corners, but value engineers is about enhancing efficiency and looking at the long term as a solution, not just for yourself, but for the environment as well. It should serve both the purposes and collaborate. Earlier, projects were meant for 2-3 people to work together, but they were all friends. But right now, ideas are what people are going to collaborate with. And that is what we want to encourage students to really start looking at. And of course, we are not telling them, okay, you take this tomorrow, come back to me in 3 weeks and submit a project report. No, it's not going to happen. We're going to say, here's 16 weeks of time. We want you to study the problem. You want you to understand the problem, go through the works, find a methodology, put in a plan, see how you are going through the schedule and produce an outcome. So no longer the report is for, the marks is for the report and the viva voce, but the marks is for the process. Have you studied this properly? Have you done value engineering on this? Have you seen how green can actually make an impact on this? So these are areas where you need to tell them that green is not about either compliance or feel good factor. Green is about value to your customer. That is the key factor that every young mind should hit into them. So whenever they go and say, my parents are buying an apartment, the first question is to ask is, you please tell me what are the sustainable solutions do you have? Do you have an STP here? Do you have solar here? How are you ensuring these things are there or not? So they should be able to provide those tick boxes to parents to say, this is what it is. That is what young minds have to be trained for. And that's what we're planning to include as our process in the system for diploma education is all about. And today's kids don't like listening to anything in classroom. They want to say, I want to dirty my hands. Take me to a place, show me how it is. I want to see how it looks like. If I don't see it, then I don't believe it, right? So how can I dirty my hands in some of these concepts? How can I try this out? How can I go and find out? How can I understand what are these cases that you're talking about? Who's done it? Can you show me some? And they don't say, show me an Indian case study. They say, show me a global case study. Show me somebody who's done it. I'd like to see how it works. And until then, they don't believe. So proof of concepts are not going to fly, but actual work that has translated to efficiency is what it's going to fly. So now we are also looking at building case studies and use cases in partnership with industry to see how that can become part of the learning process. I'll tell you a very funny problem I've got. I've told this to Hari as well. He knows very well because I'm the whining child when it comes to engineering. You know, every business school has got repositories of case studies. God damn it, from VTU all the way till the last best engineering colleges, not one idiot has got a use case study nor a case study in engineering. No. And that is where we have a problem. Today, engineering education has to move out from being just chapter driven to concept and knowledge driven to telling them these are the use cases. A lot of students are getting out of engineering because they say, it is not reality, sir. What they're telling us is history. Today, I don't know what these are applying at all. So unless we bring in those use, so we have now partnered with BCIC to build a case center and have started gathering a lot of cases. We've got about 18 cases now. We're slowly building a case repository in engineering and want to expand that further. So we're looking at various problem statements, case studies, use cases, all of these that we can use and integrate them as part of our curriculum as well. And working and continuing to put this in the system. And all this will be hosted on the Karnataka LMS, which will be accessible to all students across the state. So if we really intend that sustainability should be part of everybody's decision making, whether it's a young mind, the parent, and whoever they are going to influence, right? It is now time to have an education strategy that really provides students as to how you're going to ensure these things can happen, providing them with real cases and demonstrating and saying, yes, it is workable. Today, sustainability is part of value engineering. I think that is going to be the critical aspect that we want everybody to understand. And if we are able to achieve that, I think we would have done a great service and helped ourselves to see that we get into a sustainable mode, and we'll have more warriors coming in to support our objective of making either Bangalore, Karnataka, or India or the world a real sustainable, better place for all of us to live in. So these were my few thoughts I had. And these are not thoughts, by the way. We are working on it. We are implementing it. So we are walking the talk. And this is happening in a government establishment. It's the Department of Collegiate and Technical Education, and the technical education in specific, where we are designing a curriculum to see that students are taught using cases, are assessed for their tutorials and what they're going to present, and also what cases they're going to build. So it's no longer an internship where you just go there, spend and get a letter and say I've completed internship. It's a structured internship. It's a structured project that they have to go in as well, and ensuring the Honorable Minister's commitment to the industry to say, we will provide job-ready students. But one of the key aspects that we are embedding into these systems as part of our problem statements is, how do you ensure sustainability is a key part of all aspects, whether you're a mechanical engineer, whether you're a civil engineer, whether you're an electrical engineer, all of you have to see how sustainability is part of your teaching and learning process and an experience process that students will really have. So that's the agenda. We have a large agenda. We are working on it. We've started on the journey for the last 18 months now. And in the next 6 months, we will touch our first milestone when we would have really launched the entire curriculum. Relevant, have more of the concepts that are happening today, and also concepts that industry is using today to make sure they are competent enough to either gain employment or become an entrepreneur in this space. So these are some of the thoughts I shared, and this is what we're trying to do to shape young engineers and make that they have green in their mind as part of their daily process and not as an exception. Thank you.